Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome back to the Atlas Fanfic channel, the Go to Fanficity channel on YouTube. Today I'm back with part 6 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a Prodigy half Hyuga and Kaguya. The playlist of the story is above, and with that being said, let the tale begin. Point 5. Chapter 29. I was sitting in a shitty apartment with a crying woman and surrounded by corpses. I feel like my life took a wrong turn somewhere. The reality of the situation hit me. I had just experimented on 6 people and killed 3 of them. This was my life from now on. This would only happen more in the future. I blew a heavy breath from my nose and stood up. It seems crying women are my weakness. Perhaps a gift before I go. I gave the woman one final check over. Her chakra system was still a little fragile, but she now had bigger reserves than myself. I blew a breath out of my nose while I rubbed my eyes. I think it's time I got out of here. I sent the sleeping woman a wave as I made my way to the door. I left the woman and the other survivors in the apartment after gathering the corpses for later research. Food storage scrolls were fantastic, expensive but fantastic. Gotta love a little time dilation. I think I might need more food storage scrolls. I made my way out of the city towards Iwa and Kusa's shared border after dropping my hinge. According to the scroll, Shiro Renzo had been wandering the border and killing Kusa shinobi. He had his genin team with him and was showing them the ropes. I was still undecided about going for a total wipe and killing him and his students. I wasn't sure I wanted to start killing kids. Sigh. Grass's capital was extremely close to its border. So, it was just a short half-an-hour trip that I made with my Byakugan active. A lot was going on. Both Konoha and Kusa shinobi were heavily patrolling the border. The Iwa shinobi seemed to have set up camps and were using hit-and-run tactics. Though it seemed that neither side crossed the border, they only threw weapons and the occasional jutsu at each other. I spent my day wandering the border Byakugan active trying to find my target. I of course had no luck. I did meet some friendly Konoha and Kusa shinobi though. The cannon fodder from Konoha wasn't much help, but the Kusa shinobi pointed me to Shiro Renzo's last known location. He had a genin with explosive release on his team who was stirring up some trouble. He also had a Kamizuru on hand as well. Kamizuru were Iwa's version of the Aburame, only they used bees, wasps, and hornets, which was extremely annoying. Shiro Renzo was likely strong, only the stronger jonin get clan children in their teams. Or at least that's how it was in Konoha. I doubted it was any different in Iwa. I wandered the area where Shiro's team was last spotted. I think I need a different name for Shiro. Evil Shiro? No. That should be my name if anything. Shiro the Second? Shiro number 2? Iwa Shiro? Black-haired Shiro? Black Shiro? Kuro Shiro? Enemy Shiro? That's it. Enemy Shiro. I wandered the area for a while longer. Eventually, I decided that staying on this side of the border and following the unspoken rules would get me nowhere. No one told me I had to stay in Kusa after all. I deactivated my gravity seal and checked my weapons. Boom asterisk. I felt the heat of the explosion wash over me from my position behind a tree. It seems Iwa's shinobi were pretty good. I had hidden my chakra and I was sure there were no bees, wasps, or hornets around. How did these assholes find me? I did a quick count and saw 14 ninjas were approaching me, with more on the way. I had foregone Shikaku no Kyoka for range and so far, it was paying off. I was outmaneuvering them and avoiding attempts to surround me. Boom asterisk. Though one Chunin was getting a little annoying with his constant explosions. I grabbed a handful of explosive tags and started slapping them on trees as I passed. I had finished slapping several down when the first had started exploding. Boom asterisk. 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 My explosive tags only caught one Chunin, but they slowed the rest of my pursuers. Which was what I needed, having to dodge thrown weapons and flying chunks of rock had slowed my speed. I activated Shikaku no Kyoka and sped off towards the border with a chain of Shunshin. I arrived back at the border annoyed but whole and hale. I didn't see any sign of enemy Shiro or his team. The second I stopped traveling along the trees and touched the ground, I was swarmed by ninja. IWAs seemed to have some method of sensing using the ground. What was worse was that it had an extreme range and was invisible to my Byakugan. My late-night trip into enemy territory had proved fruitless. Though at least I learned something. But Aoi, he's just a kid. Another trip into Iwa's territory the following day provided similar results. It doesn't matter. Even if he's a kid now, he won't always be. Soon he'll have grown and he'll be killing our brothers and sisters. By then it will be too late for regrets. Though this time they had successfully surrounded me. But he's a kid now. Who knows what will happen in the future? He might quit being a ninja after a scare. Though there were only 8 of them. And no one was throwing explosive tags at me. Which was always a plus. I sighed. The 2 idiots had forgotten about me and were fighting while the other 6 alternated between watching me and watching the idiot duo. Though they were underestimating me because I lacked a flak jacket, something available to anyone above Jinin. I felt my heart beating against my chest and took a deep breath. In through the nose. I activated Shikaku no Kyoka, foregoing my Byakugan's range, and my world slowed. Out through the mouth. My legs flooded with chakra, and my fingertips glowed lightly. I bent my knees slightly and took off in a burst of speed towards the ninja with the most chakra. He didn't have time to do more than widen his eyes slightly before he died from a strike to the heart. Another Shunshin and another strike to the heart, and the female Chunin next to my first target died. Though the other ninjas seemed to have caught on and were now paying attention to me. I Shunshined to the next closest ninja and aimed a strike at his heart. He was quicker than his fallen comrades and dodged 3 of my strikes in quick succession before I tagged him on the gut with the 4th. He wasn't dead, but he was out of the fight and screaming bloody murder. The remaining 5 ninjas were quickly approaching, trying to team up on me, so I Shunshined to the farthest ninja who was making hand signs and preparing to launch a technique. I tried to strike him in the lower back, but he turned and intercepted my strike with a half-formed stone gauntlet. I blinked and tried to strike him 6 more times, but my strikes were intercepted each time. My enemy sent me a smirk. Smarmy bastard. I briefly eyed my remaining opponents. The one advocating for my survival was trying to help his injured comrade and stopped his pursuit. The one arguing with him was guarding his back. The remaining 2 were headed my way. I sent another 2 strikes at my opponent and wasn't surprised when he blocked them. Annoying. If at first you don't succeed. The chakra in my hands shifted, started spinning, soon becoming a visible blue swirling drill of chakra. I struck my opponent's gauntlets with lackluster results. My chakra drill sheared through the stone gauntlet and parted his hand before it ran out of steam. My opponent let out a grunt. Arg! Though the pain my chakra drill caused him did provide me with an opportunity. I jumped and aimed my second chakra drill at his throat and sheared half of it away. Though I got covered in blood for my trouble. I used his body as a launch pad and jumped into a nearby tree. My pursuers had retreated and were grouped up and covering my advocate while he tried fruitlessly to save his still wailing comrade. I grinned at them. I thought they would pursue, but I guess not. A few tense seconds passed. The IWA ninja were grouped and I was watching them from my spot on the tree. My advocate had given up on his comrade and looked lost in thought. My advocate stood and focused on me. A few more seconds passed. I got tired of waiting and sent a vacuum palm at the group. The ninja at the front of the group got hit and tumbled away. Seeing that I was successful, I sent 2 more vacuum palms at the group and Shunshined to the one that was tumbling away. Crack asterisk. A 1 for all stomp to the chest finished her. I blew a breath out of my nose. The remaining 3 had recovered and entered a formation. I eyed them closely. They weren't making hand size or trying to palm an explosive note. What was their game? I caught a flicker at the edge of my range. Shit! I deactivated Chikaku no Kyoka and expanded my range. Another 8 ninjas were approaching. They seemed to be surrounding me. I didn't have enough chakra to fight that many. I activated Chikaku no Kyoka and sent a 2-handed vacuum palm at the group and sunshine towards one of the ninjas trying to surround me. I tapped him on the knee as I passed, crippling him and hopefully slowing any pursuers. Hopefully, they would stop and help their injured comrade. They didn't stop and help their injured comrade, though that didn't stop me from escaping. I made it well past the border and rubbed my irritated eyes. I think I used them too much. I stopped to give my eyes a break and got surrounded. Annoying. I made my way to one of Konoha's unofficial camps, hoping to get some rest. This mission was proving to be annoying. Perhaps I should have stayed within the land of fire. A new day dawned, marking my 6th day on the mission. I activated my Byakugan and took note of the lack of clan shinobi. Perhaps they didn't want to consume their strength before the war even began. I blew a breath through my nose. I don't think I'm doing any more assassination missions anytime soon. I wandered around the camp looking for things to do. I had no plans on doing any fighting today. I've had enough excitement for a while. I came across Konoha's field hospital. It was hastily built with earth release, but looked rather sturdy. I wonder if I could offer my services. And we don't have any time to mess around, so scram. After being laughed at and getting an ear beating from a malnourished-looking Mednin, I was roughly escorted out. I figured they'd at least need someone to apply bandages or clean wounds and give me a chance. But if they're going to be assholes... I looked at the malnourished idiot. I held my hand up and it glowed green for a moment before I switched to my chakra scalpels. I took a second to take in the look of shock on the idiot's face before I disappeared in a shunshin. With nothing to do, I sent a clone to the capital and I made my way back to the border. Every time I crossed the border, they seemed to hone onto me regardless of what I did. At first, I thought they were using insects or some sort of earth-sensing method to find me, but that didn't seem to be the case. Even when there were no insects or I was up in the trees, they were still able to locate and track me. Did they have a Senjutsu user? I traveled along the border Byakugan active. There was no sign of Fuinjutsu nor was there chakra present in the ground, so it didn't look like anyone was using a technique of some kind. I was about 4 hours away from where I had last fought. I figured their sensing couldn't possibly extend this far. I silently crept past the border. There were no trees here, providing me little cover. I watched as 4 IWA ninjas started making their way towards me. I thought they could detect my chakra levels, and that's why squads of IWA shinobi had come after me each time. Though that might not be the case. Maybe their forces are just heavily concentrated around Grass's capital? IWA shinobi all seemed to wear red clothing with brown flak jackets. It looked pretty cool, but also made them easy to spot. I palmed a bone senbon and started heading to the right. I watched one ninja make some hand signs and point in my direction. Did each team have a sensor or something? I coated the senbon in electricity and watched as the apparent sensor made more hand signs. The team slowed and started approaching slower. The sensor retreated towards the back of the group and withdrew a sword. I started making my way left, trying to get a line of sight on the team. Eventually, I was confident and I took my shot. I flung the senbon with a shunshin enhanced throw. It hit the sensor directly in the gut and the senbon continued through him and into a tree behind him. The sensor fell and grunted, and one of the team members positioned himself in front of him while the others started making their way towards me. It's likely the sensor won't survive. Gut wounds are often fatal. I decided that my work for the day was done. I disappeared in a shunshin toward the border. I made my way back to the camp lost in thought. Lightning-coated senbon were extremely effective. Perhaps what my chakra drill needed was lightning? And maybe the Rasengan as well. Maybe everything needs some lightning? Something new to test. I made it back to camp. Surprisingly, my clone hadn't dispelled yet. I dispelled it to prevent future trouble and leaned on a tree while I absorbed its memories. My clone hadn't caused much trouble, he just took over a clinic and started providing free treatment. Though I wish he hadn't started offering plastic surgery. Now men and women were walking around with much larger assets than they originally had. I rubbed my eyes. I don't know I'd be able to resist the temptation to do the same to myself. Especially in my teenage years. Now that I knew I could do it, could I stop myself? Sigh. I sat in a room I had rented. I enjoyed the camp and all, but I'd rather a bed than a bedroll. I was kicking around the thought of assimilating that woman's cells. My main problem was that it would change my chakra nature, and I would come off differently to sensors. Something that shouldn't happen outside of Konoha. I also didn't need the healing or the water affinity either. But the woman's adaptability was interesting. If I had the same, I could probably assimilate whatever bloodline I wanted. Though there was no need to rush, I was plenty strong as it was. Perhaps I should start taking missions around Kiri? I wanted the Shikatsumiyaku after all. What other bloodlines were interesting? I remember that there was a clan of people who could turn their bodies into smoke similar to the Hozuki clan's weird water body. Sigh. I shouldn't get overly excited. I had a lot of time before things really kicked off. Chapter 30. My day had started well until I was ambushed. Shiro! No! I was picked up and spun. Hello Kushina, what brings you here? And when would I be too big to be picked up? Your mother sent me? Why did that sound like a question? Oh, did she? What does she want? Kushina pressed her head against mine as she hummed. She got a mandatory mission and has to chase some traitor. Ah, someone got sensitive intel and they needed someone to grab them. How many people are on the mission? The number of people sent depended on how strong the traitor was and how much combat was expected. Though these missions were usually done by the Umbu, meaning they were likely short-staffed. No clue. Alright. So, what brings you here? I couldn't remember if I got an answer. Kushina set me down, put her hands on her hips, and adopted a serious expression. Your mother wants me to stop you from fighting with the Iwa Nin. She leaned and stared me down. I took the time to take in her new appearance. She was wearing the standard Jonin attire and had her hair in a ponytail with her hayate on her forehead. So. She reached down and started tapping me on the nose. No. Tap asterisk. Fighting. Tap asterisk. With. Tap asterisk. The. Tap asterisk. Iwa. Tap asterisk. Nin. She straightened and sent me a brilliant smile. Okay? Well, it's a bit late. Understood. I sent her a nod. No more fighting Iwa Nin. And she ruffled my hair. You're so cute, Shiro. I am cute. So. My mission was to assassinate an Iwa Jonin. Meaning I was fighting with the Iwa Nin, which was exactly what I was just told not to do. Shiro. Kushina bent down and reached her index finger towards my nose. I deftly stepped away, avoiding more nose taps. Kushina sent me a pout in response. She straightened and crossed her arms. No fighting with the Iwa Nin. How am I supposed to do the mission? I raised an eyebrow at her. What am I supposed to do then? Kushina smiled at me and scooped me up. You're working at the field hospital while I do the mission. What? We arrived at the hospital. A Mednin was waiting for us at the entrance. He was bald and looked to be furious. Shiro, you're with me. He turned and walked into the building. I squirmed out of Kushina's embrace and quickly followed after him, only sparing a second to send Kushina a wave as I left. I've been told you're competent. All you have to do is not kill anyone. That shouldn't be hard. Okay, where should I start? The room we were in was large and filled with stabilized but still injured people. No one is dying, so take your time and do it right. He pointed vaguely towards the left side of the room while he started walking to the right. He paused midway. Be careful, injured ninja are jumpy. Make sure to speak loudly and tell them what you're doing, don't be sneaking up on anyone. Alright. I approached the first bed on the right. Hello, I'm Shiro, I'll be healing you shortly. I was making my way through the injured ninja at a good pace. My minder was stuck on a female ninja who wouldn't let him heal her. Sit down, you stupid bitch. He gave up and knocked her unconscious and started healing her. I raised an eyebrow. What terrible bedside manner. So, what's your name? My minder side-eyed me. I don't think he's looked any less furious than when I first met him. Inomoto KG. He grunted his name at me and focused back onto his patient. Alrighty. I finished my side a little after KG finished his. I raised an eyebrow at him, wondering what's next. You didn't fuck up. I think that was praise? Thanks. I sent him a nod. Okay, we're on break now, eat and come back in like an hour. I'll be in the next room over. He jutted his thumb in the direction of the door, before jumping out a window and disappearing. I was left standing alone in a room full of unconscious patients. When in Rome, I jumped out the same window KG left from. I returned 45 minutes later and made my way to the room KG had specified. The room was the same as the one before, except the people here were conscious and loudly moaning in pain. I spared a second looking for any clan ninja but didn't see any. I couldn't just stand there and listen to them moan, so I got to work. I see you've gotten started. KG arrived with a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Yep. I was healing a woman with a large burn wound on her side. It wasn't something I was familiar with, as the civilians I healed have never had their clothes burnt onto their torso. Why are the people here awake? The other room was full of unconscious people, only one or two being awake. These are the Genin and Chunin. We're expected to be able to dodge them when they try to hit us. So, they sedate the strong ones. Okay. And these are the ones with minimal injuries. There's another section dedicated to surgery and stuff. I paused to watch him swat someone's hand away from his cigarette. That's mine, bitch. I blinked. KG had destroyed the filter on the cigarette with his teeth, making it unusable. Cotton was coming out of the cigarette's filter. I turned back to the woman, cutting parts of her shirt that were burnt into her skin from her with a chakra scalpel. If these were minimal injuries, I wondered what was considered major injuries. We made through another room after the second before calling it a day. KG's mood never seemed to improve, as he seemed to be perpetually angry. We didn't run into any other menin. The only people I saw were trainees who were changing diapers or cleaning wounds and sometimes sedating uncooperative patients. The hospital was divided oddly. The lower your rank, the more roommates you had. If you were a Genin, you pretty much shared your room with 5 other wounded Genin. It sucked in my opinion, but I guess you couldn't treat the Jonin like Genin. I was sneaking out of camp hoping to escape Kushina's affection. Shiro! But of course, it wasn't to be. Kushina picked me up and held me to her chest, leaving my legs dangling. Hello. Kushina used one of her hands to ruffle my hair and set off. Kushina started making her way through the camp. I had to endure the stares of my fellow ninja as I was carried. Kushina spent the walk telling me about Makoto. She was pregnant and moody. Though Kushina used the words not fun instead of moody. Kushina brought me to a tent and set me down before entering. I followed her in, wondering what was up. Few injutsu time. Kushina proceeded to fill the room with smoke as she unsealed an assortment of paper and sealing tools. Is it alright to do this in the camp? Kushina smiled. Don't worry. That didn't answer my question. You are doing amazing, Shiro. I appreciated the praise, but the supportive backrub was too much. Thanks. My progress in Fuinjutsu was mediocre. All I could do was copy excising seals. I wouldn't be making anything original anytime soon. I think Fuinjutsu bullshittery was a few years off, which sucked as I wanted to use Fuinjutsu to get to the moon. So, no Tensigen for me. Should I have gotten into Fuinjutsu earlier? I finished the final stroke on the silent seal I had been making. It worked, but even I with my mediocre experience could tell that it was clunky. Fuinjutsu is all about intent, there is no correct alphabet. You can draw whatever you want as long as there is structure and intent. That sounded too good to be true. However, if your intent wavers during the drawing of the seal, it becomes unusable. That still sounded too good to be true, but who was I to argue with an Uzumaki? Do I need to have intent for each character or just the seal in general? And what do you mean by structure? Kushina picked up a brush, dipped it in ink before infusing the tip of her brush with chakra. She drew a perfect circle with the Uzumaki swirl spiraling into the center. This is the structure or the foundation if you prefer, and you need intent in every brushstroke. That was not how I was doing seals. What's with the chakra on the tip of the brush? And can you do that again? I want to watch with my Byakugan. Kushina dipped her brush tip into the ink and started on her circle. I activated my Byakugan, eager to see what was happening. The chakra is how I infuse my intent into the seal. I watched her chakra drain at an astonishing pace, though at the rate her chakra regenerated, I imagined her reserves would be full by the time she started on a second seal. She slowed her pace while doing the Uzumaki spiral. Her chakra expense stayed the same, though the amount used changed as she needed more time to make the spiral. The structure of each seal depends on what you want it to do. You'll get a feel for it in time. The way Kushina was doing Fuinjutsu was completely different from how I had been practicing. Perhaps this is how you do it when you reach mastery? I deactivated my Byakugan and closed my eyes. I need to write this down and memorize it. I opened my eyes to see Kushina had started on something else. Her brush flew across the page without an ounce of hesitation in her movements. Her movements were fluid and natural, born from countless hours of practice and repetition. It was something I hoped to one day achieve myself. I turned my eyes away from her and looked at my paper. I picked up my brush, dipping it in ink, gathering chakra on the tip, and bringing it down onto the page. Mastery would come with time. Though now I had something to experiment with. I arrived the day after, ready for another day at the hospital. I walked into what was considered the staff room and took a seat waiting for Keiji. I liked him so far. He wasn't friendly or nice, but I got along with him. I held my finger out and a tiny Rasengan swirled into existence. I let the chakra unravel and the Rasengan dispersed. I formed the Rasengan again, this time adding some electricity to it. The lightning was gathering in the center of the Rasengan and lashing out in tiny steams of blue lightning. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted, but I couldn't imagine a way that it would go better. I let it disperse and leaned back into my chair, throwing my leg over my knee and crossing my arms. That felt too easy. Would it shock or would it pierce? Did it need more electricity? I blew a breath out of my nose and closed my eyes. Questions. Questions. During battles, the thing that kills you isn't enemy ninja, it's usually explosions or ninjutsu. This came from a ninja that was laying on his stomach as he had 6 kunai jutting from his back. An explosion did this? He chuckled. After I killed this bastard with an explosive tag, his friends fill me with kunai. Fair enough. I hummed in reply. A quick scan revealed a shuriken in his leg. The shuriken hit an artery. He let out a pained laugh. I didn't feel it until you talked about it. He had a senbon stuck his femur. Who was throwing senbon hard enough to pierce bone? That's how adrenaline works. When you're no longer in danger, you start feeling everything and experience a bit of a crash. I hit him with the anesthetic jutsu, before putting my hands on either side of the injury. Don't move, you're only feeling better, you're not better. He quirked his lips. You won't get any trouble from me. I snorted. I hope not. I'd hate to have to tell your family that you died because I slipped. He chuckled and his body shook, making me nervous. My joke could become reality. I nervously scratched my nose with my thumb before getting back to work. I started manipulating his tissues to push the shuriken from his body. The process only took a few seconds. Sadly, I had to do this 7 more times. Blood started to spill from his injury. Oops, forgot about the artery. Yeah, so my brother said, "Keiji, I bet you're too scared to climb on the roof," and I showed him I climbed up the wall like a spider. Keiji chuckled and scratched his face. I asked him why he became a menin and was now getting his life story. And that bastard got mad and threw a rock at me. Keiji slammed his fist on the table, making water slosh out of my glass slightly. So, I fell from way up high and hit my head and boom. I was different. Keiji took a sip from his glass before continuing. The moment I woke up, I realized I wasn't the same. I couldn't stop myself from telling people to fuck off, and I couldn't stop my thoughts from leaving my mouth. He had what I'd call an evil grin on his face. Anyway, weeks later it became obvious I was now amazing with chakra. You see, the fall knocked some stuff loose, but also tightened some stuff up. Keiji rubbed an arcing scar that went across the top of his head. Sadly, I couldn't be a ninja. I kept running directly at my enemies and disobeying orders, so they made a menin, and now I fix idiots for a living. Well, what an interesting life you've had, Keiji. Thanks for telling me. I sent him a nod. Anytime, you little shit. Keiji was one of a kind. As he got to know me better, he hid less of his true self. He was one of the village's most accomplished medics. I had wondered what motivated him to become a great medic. Turns out he hid his head and couldn't become a ninja, and thus was forced to be a menin. Keiji was probably one of the most unique people I've ever met. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. Someone was wailing on Keiji's side. I took a peek over my shoulder to see what Keiji would do. Keiji stopped what he was doing and stalked over to the screaming teen. I want to go home. The teen had stopped screaming when Keiji got close to him. Go to sleep, you silly bitch. Keiji then hammer-fisted his head. Thwack asterisk. My jaw dropped and I had to close my eyes for a moment. What just happened? I opened my eyes and Keiji had returned to healing his previous patient like nothing happened. Did Keiji just punch one of the patients unconscious? I looked around looking for someone who had just seen what I saw. I and a female ninja with a broken arm made eye contact and we shared a moment. I broke the eye contact and rubbed my face with both my hands. What a day! Chapter 31. If I knew I'd spend a month out of Konoha, I wouldn't have taken the mission. The improvements with my Fuinjutsu and my practice with cell transplants almost made this whole ordeal tolerable. Almost. I frowned and rolled around in the bed trying to find a comfortable position. After a week of hospital work, I started sending clones to fight the Iwa Nin while I healed. I then realized that I didn't need to be there at all, and sent a clone to replace myself as well. I then spent a lot of time looking at the samples I got from the woman with bright yellow hair and purple eyes. I was no closer to figuring out why the cell's chakra had a healing property, though I figured out that integrating her cells only added a small amount of new chakra to the body and didn't change the existing chakra pool. Was there any way to integrate 2 separate chakras as Madara had? I had no idea, and I was no closer to figuring it out. Thus I spent most of my time rolling around in my rented room and pondering. Could she have been a half Uzumaki? I tossed the idea around for a moment before dismissing it. She probably would have had more chakra. Though didn't she integrate with the foreign cells? I couldn't clearly remember, though at the time it seemed that she had. What a blunder. I think it's time to look into getting a lab. Kushina wanted me to join her after my shift at the hospital, so I was here in person today. I didn't want any clone shenanigans. I watched dully as Keiji cut both his and the patient's wrist. He weaved some hand signs, and the blood from his wrist wriggled like a worm and started to flow into the patient. Keiji only used the technique for a few seconds before he healed both their wrists and set off to continue his duties. How did you get that to work? I gave Keiji a once-over. Did he have a bloodline? The technique's called blood transfusion. you have to have O-negative blood to use it. So Keiji was a universal donor. Cool, I guess. I'd never seen or heard of it before. I sent him a nod and thumbs up, though I doubted my non-verbal praise meant much to him. Yeah, it's something I made, my fucking brother bled out and I was helpless to stop it. Ouch! I'm sorry to hear that, Keiji. Keiji shook his head and started running his hands along his patient's body looking for injuries. Don't be, the fucker blew himself up with an explosive tag, he always was an idiot and it was just a matter of time until he got hurt. I wasn't sure of what to say, so I stayed quiet and returned to work. What are you doing, Shiro? I was doing a handstand and pondering lightning release. I wanted to add some bigger moves to my repertoire. The main problem I and my clones had with the IWA was their swarm tactics. I couldn't get farther than 5 kilometers past the border without having more than 7 try to kill me. So, I needed a big jutsu where I needed to improve my shunshin so I was fast enough not to get caught. I decided I needed a new perspective. Kushina blinked at me. You can join me. She nodded and joined me with her own handstand. So, what did you want? Kushina had started walking on her hands towards her living quarters, so I followed after her. We're heading back to Konoha tomorrow. I hummed. That was good news. I was tired of being here and I think this was the last assassination mission I'd ever willingly take. You catch enemy, Shiro? Kushina snorted and shook her head. No, someone from Kusa got him. All that time and effort for nothing. Does our mission count as complete or incomplete? I think this was the first time I had failed a mission. Complete. Alright. So, what are we doing? Kushina laughed, sprung from her hands, and landed on her feet. We're doing Fuinjutsu. I stared at her for a moment before I sprung from my hands to my feet. Sounds good. I tried to insert some enthusiasm into my voice even though I didn't feel it. I should have just sent a clone. While I'm thinking about clones. A quick hand sign and I sent a clone to say goodbye to Keiji. With Kushina traveling with me, it would take 3 days to reach Konoha. It gave me plenty of time to get lost in thought. I was what I'd call halfway into becoming a stem cell vampire. My main problem was that my body heavily rejected foreign cells and that the chakra from foreign cells didn't blend with already existing chakra. Other people were able to accept my cells, but the reverse didn't seem possible. My body wanted nothing to do with foreign cells and rejected them quite handily. Which was a problem if I wanted to become a stem cell vampire. I figured that my body might be more open to Kaguya or Hyuga cells, though the problem with that is my immortality would be dependent on the survival of the Hyuga and Kaguya clans. Which was acceptable but not ideal. Sigh. I also needed to finish the lightning Rasengan and lightning drill. I hadn't even got through my list of experiments, though I guess it was alright if that took a while. So much to do. Have you been using the strength of 100 seal? I blinked and focused on Kushina. I used it once and haven't needed to use it again. I haven't run into someone I couldn't handle. Start getting comfortable with it. It would be a shame to go through all that effort to make it and die because you couldn't use it. That's true. Though I'd hate to waste some of the chakra I've gathered. Can we continue the Fuinjutsu lessons? Kushina nodded but was still looking ahead as we traveled. Whenever we're both free. Even if I only got a single lesson a month, I'd still make more progress than I would by myself. Thanks, I wasn't making any progress by myself. Kushina reached out and ruffled my hair, but said nothing. After an uneventful trip, we arrived at Konoha. I said goodbye to Kushina and decided to have a brief look around. I walked around periodically activating my Byakugan as I went. Even though tensions were escalating, the people seemed happy and the market was well stocked. I figured there'd be some signs of the impending war, but it seems there were no shortages and the people didn't look stressed. I gave the village one last sweep with my Byakugan before I sent a clone off to find Guy and I made my way home for my customary post-mission shower. Shiro. I blinked and spun on my heel. Hi, Mom. I walked over and gave her a hug, which she returned. Why do you have a bounty? I thought I told Kushina to stop you from fighting with IWA Shinobi. She still hadn't let go of me. It was a bit late by the time she arrived. That and I kept sending clones out. I liked learning from the mistakes the clones made. It was better than making them myself. Mom stayed quiet but didn't loosen her hold on me. I thought you wanted me to get a bounty. I tapped her on the back, trying to signal for my release. That was before I knew war was likely in our future. Mom ignored my tapping and kept her hold on me. Fair enough. I gave up my escape attempts and settled in. I might not be leaving for a while. Though I wondered what my bounty was, I decided that it was probably better to let it go for now. I had regained my freedom and was sitting on the counter while Mom cooked. I idly kicked my legs, feeling a bit anxious. Heaven's palm saved me. I sat quietly for a while, wondering what Heaven's palm was. Eventually, it occurred to me that she was talking about the Rasengan. Tell me about it. She shook her head. It got me out of a sticky situation. She said nothing further and continued cooking. Tell me about it. Mom shook her head and didn't reply, meaning it wasn't something she could talk about, either because she was uncomfortable or it was classified. I swung my legs up and sat cross-legged on the counter. Heaven's palm is incomplete. That got her attention. What do you mean? I formed a tiny Rasengan on my finger and started adding electricity to it. It was meant to have a nature release added to it. I looked at my Rasengan. It was just a normal Rasengan with electricity in its center. Though mine is still incomplete. I had tested it, and though the electricity damaged things as the Rasengan dispersed, I think it should probably be completely made of electricity. Though I was waiting until I had a private place to practice. Mom had forgotten about dinner and looked to be lost in thought. I waved my hand at her and pointed at the stove, successfully returning her attention to our dinner. All right, I'm going to see how emergency rations is doing. Mom shook her head at me but didn't look in my direction. Change its name. I know you think it's funny, but other people probably won't. A sound suggestion. Too bad, I'm going to completely ignore it. All right. I sent her a nod and a sloppy salute. I turned and started leaving. I had some new ideas to try. Maybe I could get them in before dinner. Sadly, I couldn't get them in before dinner. Though I got around to it the day after, I was now eyeing the 12 rabbits I had caged. I wanted to get started on Deadpool immortality and biological absorption. I figured the best way to get into absorption was to try and make one whole rabbit from 2 injured rabbits, so that's where I'd start. The males would go first and I'd work my way up to the females. The winner would become emergency rations mate and I'd no longer have to hunt for rabbits. Though I figured I'd go through 3 dozen rabbits first, I guess I'd see. Shiro, we're going to Shimes. I heard Mom yell through the door. Sure thing, I'll be out in a moment. I heard her retreat from the door and had a devious idea. I wouldn't be going. I made a hand sign and a clone appeared in a puff of smoke. I waved the smoke away, feeling a tad annoyed. Perhaps I should make my shadow clone smokeless. Something else to do. I now had 12 dead rabbits. Sadly, I couldn't make rabbit stew out of these monstrosities. 12 attempts and 12 failures. How do I get rid of these? I can't bury them in the yard, they will be seen. I'll use storage seals and dump them when I do a mission. That's the plan. I turned and eyed the mice I had bought. I had wanted to do some stem cell transplants with them, but as I had some successful human trials, I wasn't sure I needed them anymore. Though the human trials only worked out so well because of that woman's unique bloodline. Decisions. I now had 12 dead rabbits and 6 dead mice sealed in a scroll. The stem cell transplant worked as I'd intended, only resulting in 1 mouse death. The remaining 5 were used to practice biological absorption. It predictably didn't go well. Though I wasn't in a hurry, Rome wasn't built in a day after all. My main problem was lack of necessary cells. I needed to be able to change cell functions to get biological absorption working. The following day I was seated in the third training ground practicing with the chakra drill. I had made the chakra I used in a denser and it seemed to be working better, though I was still planning to add electricity to it. My clones were off in the distance trying to make a pure lightning Rasengan. Though the Rasengan with lightning at its core did a good job, it wasn't quite up to par. I wanted something stronger. Though I may be getting greedy. I had 3 more days of unsuccessful training. I figured it might be more productive to come back to it later with a fresh mind. So, I was now browsing the Hyuga library. The only thing of note I had found was the Lightning Shadow clone technique. I activated my Byakugan as I was leaving and took a second to memorize it before I was out the door. I was wandering the archives, or at least the section devoted to lightning jutsu. This was the good stuff only accessible to Jonin, requiring permission from the Hokage to enter. Sadly, it was heavily guarded. I was warned if they detected any chakra usage I'd find myself in TNI. So, I couldn't do the obvious and activate my Byakugan and copy everything in here. Yet, I looked through the scrolls. There were some repeats from the Hyuga library, but that didn't diminish my enthusiasm. There were a lot of lightning jutsus that needed weapons as well. Even then I was spoiled for choice. Lightning release, lightning beam. Lightning release, lightning blast. Lightning release, lightning bomb. Lightning release, lightning breath. Lightning release, lightning aura. Lightning release, lightning calling. Lightning release, shocking. Lightning release, kiss of death. Lightning release, omnidirectional lightning wave. Lightning release, lightning construct. Lightning release, lightning vortex. Lightning release, infusion. Lightning release, shock wave. Lightning release, zap. They were all straightforward names. I could tell what most of them did with a glance. There were a few that I was interested in. Though I was going to copy them all, I didn't think I'd have the time to practice most of them. But I guess that's what shadow clones are for. I started making my way through the scrolls, starting with the most interesting and making my way down. Lightning release, lightning construct. The user can turn electricity into tools, objects, weapons, and other items, and create semi-living constructs. A user who has mastered this ability can use it for almost any situation, creating anything they need. Chakra expensive, but also extremely useful. It was something I was extremely interested in. If this technique worked as it said it did, I might forego the Kaguya bloodline. Lightning release, omnidirectional lightning wave. The user releases massive amounts of electricity in every direction at once. This ability allows the user to dispatch many foes at once and destroy large areas like villages at the cost of the user's life. I felt this technique should be better guarded. Lightning release, shocking. The user releases extreme electrical current to destroy almost anything, causing extreme amounts of heat and paralysis in living beings. This was just a more powerful version of lightning palm. Lightning release, kiss of death. I sighed as I skimmed over it. It was exactly as the name stated. You kissed your opponent and ran current from your mouth and to your hand, which you place on your target's heart. I decided that it was time to get to work. I activated Kokoro no Kyoka and waited for a second to see if I was going to be attacked for chakra usage. I wasn't dead or dying, which was good. Now it was go time. I started memorizing each scroll, only giving each a glance before continuing. I idly wondered if I could ever learn all of these techniques. Ninjutsu didn't come naturally to me. Though I guess it gives me something to do after the war. I guess that's my post-war goal, learning all the village's lightning ninjutsu. Chapter 32. 8 months passed in a blur. I had occupied myself with training, small experiments, and some fuinjutsu. Mom and I started taking more missions around Kiri at my request. I was looking for Kaguya clansmen, and maybe if I was lucky, I'd find Yugo's clan as well. Though I considered the former more likely than the latter. I'd had no success so far, but I had high hopes. Even though the Shikatsumiyaku was uncommon in the Kaguya, having a body without the bloodline would still be helpful. The only thing of note was my birthday, and that was a small celebration only including Dai, Mom, and Kushina, who Mom had invited. I held my palm out and observed my lightning Rasengan. I'd say it was complete or almost complete. I had run out of ways to improve it, so this might be its final form. I half-heartedly tossed the Rasengan and watched as it impacted a tree. The lightning sphere expanded to 4 times its size and then dispersed in multiple streams of lightning striking the surroundings. The Rasengan didn't pierce like I thought it would. It instead turns into a big sphere of lightning and explodes, shooting lightning into the surroundings. I had sadly learned it the painful way. I had figured the lightning Rasengan would just be a swirling Chidori, but I'd take what I could get. I admired the charred and smoking tree. This was more interesting anyways. I guess this will be called Lightning Release, Heaven's Palm. I then moved on to my next project. I eyed my lightning chakra drill. It reminded me of the Chidori, though it didn't make too much noise and it didn't have any cutting power. The lightning chakra drill was only for piercing. The lightning chakra drill worked as intended. Its piercing power had improved and I'd soon be piercing the hearts of my enemies. Though it didn't boost my speed as Kakashi's Chidori seemed to. Hopefully, I didn't have to pull a Kakashi and kill my friends with it. Though I guess time would tell. Sigh. I still needed a name for this technique. I drilled the technique into the earth and released my control over the electricity and watched it disperse into the ground. Lightning Release, Lightning Drill. Yep, that's it. The final ninjutsu I worked on was the Lightning Construct. It was by far the one I spent the most time on. I was close to getting it right. I could make simple shapes like a staff or a simple sword, but I couldn't make the construct solid. Whenever I hit something, the construct would disperse. I had tried adding more chakra or making the lightning denser, but it didn't seem to work. I had a few more ideas, but hadn't had the time to try them. Even with clones, a lot of my time was spent murdering rodents in the name of self-improvement. I made some progress in Fuinjutsu, though I couldn't maintain my intent when writing. I was still making steady progress. I was confident in making and editing existing seals, though I still wouldn't be making anything of my own creation anytime soon. The more I knew about Fuinjutsu, the less confident I was in making my own seals. It was beautiful and complicated. I was trying to mix some French and English into my seals with no success. I was pretty sure my lack of success wasn't due to any fault of my writing or use of words. I believe it has something to do with the structure. Though I wasn't sure and I didn't want anyone to ask why I knew 2 never-before-seen languages, so I didn't consult Kushina or Minato about it. So, it was up to trial and error. If it didn't work out, it wasn't a big deal. There was already an established system of sealing and I could just focus on it if English or French didn't pan out. How are you doing, Shiro? I looked away from the rabbit I was working on. Minato was standing in the doorway watching me. I blinked and stared blankly at him. He had already seen me experimenting, so it was pointless to cover anything up. And it would probably make me look suspicious, so I turned around and stabilized the rabbit I was working on before speaking. Good, thanks for asking. What brought you here? Why was my lab being invaded and why didn't any of the traps go off? Kushina and I wanted to check up on you and Sumiko. Meaning Kushina forced him to come over 'cause she wanted to see us. I just hummed at him and looked at my rabbit. He was whole and hale, having just received a new leg. I had made a breakthrough and could now turn other cells into stem cells. There was a problem with this though. A lot of the cells that turned into stem cells become cancerous. I'd say about 30% of the cells became cancerous. Which currently wasn't a problem as I was looking to study cancer, but it would be a problem if I needed to make myself a new arm. What are you working on? Now that was a difficult question. I wasn't sure of how truthful I should be. And would this catch the wrong type of attention? I'm working on a new medical ninjutsu. Minato hummed and started petting the rabbit. I had a feeling he was running a discrete diagnostic jutsu on it, but couldn't tell for sure. Minato continued petting the rabbit for a moment before he spoke. What are you trying to do? I was silent for a moment. I was mentally debating how much I could share. A few words in the right ear could get me a lab. But the reverse was also true. a few words in the right ear might also stop me from getting a lap, so I had to word this correctly. I'm trying to regrow lost limbs. Minato hummed and ran his hand along the rabbit's front left leg. It seems you were successful. I shook my head with a small smile on my lips. He could tell there was something different about the leg, but he couldn't tell what was going on at the cellular level. No, I sadly was not. I walked over to a bookshelf on the wall and grabbed a cabbage from the shelf. You may not be able to tell, but the leg is full of cancer. I brought the cabbage over to the cage and started breaking leaves off of it. It may look alright now, but over time the cancer will grow and possibly spread around the body. I made my way over the emergency rations cage and left the remainder of the cabbage with him. Done with my task, I turned my eyes to Minato. He was staring at the rabbit while it ate its cabbage, seemingly lost in thought. What I didn't say was that the more chakra one had, the less cancer seemed to form. Chakra seemed to keep cells cancer-free. Which was good for me. The technique might not even need to be improved. Cancer could be removed anyway, though Minato might not have realized it. The other problem I had was the technique's chakra cost. Minato blinked and focused on me. I had to use a good part of the chakra in my seal just for the leg of a rabbit. That wasn't true at all, but I didn't want people to think it was easy making limbs. Well, that and the jutsu would get more efficient with proficiency and added hand seals. Currently, it was sealless, but if I offloaded some of the easy work using some hand seals, I could probably improve both the speed and cost of the technique further. So only those with the strength of 100 seal can use your technique? I nodded. The third might be able to pull it off as well. Minato shook his head. Do you have a name for it? No, I didn't. Did I need a name for it? I shook my head and raised an eyebrow afterwards. Minato folded his arms and leaned against a table. The jutsu should be considered a kenjutsu. I raised an eyebrow at Minato again. Techniques were called a kenjutsu when they got banned from being taught or used. Though I had no idea who banned them. How so? I wasn't sure of his game. Was he trying to stop me from developing the technique, using it, or just teaching it? Jutsu that cause harm to the user are generally considered a kenjutsu. I nodded. I knew that and didn't need to be told. I guess it would be considered a kenjutsu. I won't be teaching anyone, I guess. Though the technique would see more use from myself. Alright, let's go see how Kushina and Mom are doing. I wondered why Mom had allowed Minato around my lab. Sure, Minato nodded. Though I guess I'd trust her, she probably had her reasons. Mom and Kushina were standing outside and chatting. Hi, Shiro. I was engulfed in a hug as soon as Kushina noticed me. Hi. I could see my mother's amused look out of the corner of my eye. So, what brought you guys here? Why was my home being invaded? Me and Minato are going to spar and we wanted to invite you to watch. I sent a look over to Minato. Did he want to show off or something? My eyes left Minato and I looked up at Kushina. Was it her who wanted to show off? I sent a look to my mother asking for permission. I got a nod from her. Sure. There was no harm in watching. I had needed a break anyway. That's great. Kushina took off in a sprint, leaving me no time to say goodbye to my mother. We arrived at Training Ground 7. Kakashi had been waiting at the training ground and sent me a look of disgust when he saw me being held by Kushina. I didn't expect to see him here. I did my best nice guy pose in his direction in an effort to annoy him. Though my pose was probably lackluster as I was still being restrained. Can you let me down? I was squeezed for a few more seconds before I was released. I landed and sent Kakashi a much better nice guy pose. Though he was chatting with Minato, so he probably didn't see it. Alrighty. Seeing that my pose was ignored, I turned to Kushina. So why are we watching you spar? Kushina ruffled my hair. Kakashi is going to take his Jonin exam soon and Minato wants to show him how a par of elite Jonin fight. I blinked and looked at Kakashi. He was probably being a cocky little shit and needed to be shown that he wasn't top shit yet. Cool. Was all that I said. I didn't know Kakashi had become a Jonin at such a young age, though that meant that he stagnated for around 10 years. I wondered if I would stagnate in the same way Kakashi did in canon. After some time, Kushina and Minato stood in front of each other. Me and Kakashi were seated in a tree at the edge of the clearing. I watched out of the corner of my eye as they started the spar with an exchange of taijutsu. Kakashi looked surprised, though I couldn't tell what surprised him. I turned my attention back to Kushina and Minato. They continued to engage for a few minutes until Kushina jumped back and Minato followed suit. I watched Kushina start to use some hand signs and Minato pulled a handful of familiar kunai from his pouch. I raised an eyebrow. It seems Minato learned the Flying Thunder God. Minato threw his kunai at Kushina as she finished her hand seals. Kushina waved a hand and a wall of wind blew Minato's kunai away. Minato charged with kunai in each hand. Kushina jumped backwards and started weaving more hand signs. Kushina created a water whip and sent it forward towards Minato. Minato threw his kunai and disappeared in a yellow flash, reappearing past the whip. I sighed and looked at Kakashi. He didn't seem surprised at Minato's use of the jutsu, so I assumed Minato had been using it for a while. I looked back to see Kushina launch a couple of dozen wind blades at Minato while he flashed around the field. Kushina was a ninjutsu cannon and Minato was fast and slippery. It was interesting watching Kushina and Minato fight. It also made me realize that I hadn't yet fought anyone at their level. Though I was technically a jonin, I was upsettingly weak compared to these two. I ran my fingers through my hair. Minato was so much faster than me, it was upsetting. Even with my improved nervous system, Chikaku no Kyoka, and near constant use of Shunshin, I wouldn't be able to match him in speed. All my effort to improve my speed. I watched Minato dodge a huge wave of water that Kushina spat from her mouth. I thought watching this fight would be entertaining, but all it did was cause me anxiety. I wasn't good enough. Though I could kill a bunch of cannon fodder, I was still nothing compared to the stronger ninjas. All it would take was one encounter and my life would be forfeit. My mother as well, she wasn't strong enough. She was cannon fodder and she would probably die like cannon fodder. I had been stronger than her for a while now. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath at the painful realization she had a close call recently as well. I don't know why I didn't think about this then. Not only did I need to get stronger, my mother did as well. Boom asterisk. A few chunks of earth flew past the tree Kakashi and I were in. I focused back onto the fight. I still had time, I didn't need to worry right away. Thanks for allowing me to watch you fight. I said a bow to Kushina and Minato, both who looked no worse for wear. I had expected them to sweat or at least breathe heavily, but I guess not. Kushina sent me a brilliant smile while Minato sent a silent nod. Anytime, Shiro. I returned her smile with as much enthusiasm as I could muster. Sorry, but I've got to go. I had thinking to do. Ah. I wanted to go eat some ramen together. Kushina pouted and mentioned free food. Free food was my weakness. Sorry, but I have things to do. I disappeared in a shunshin before Kushina had any more time to change my mind. I sat on my bed lost in thought. I had to get stronger. Taijutsu and medical ninjutsu were my main focuses. Medical ninjutsu was steadily improving and my taijutsu would improve as I got naturally stronger. Though sadly that would have to wait until puberty. I was pretty much at my physical limit. My mother, on the other hand. What could I do for her? Or what could she do for herself? And how would I get her to get her ass in gear? My realization of my mother's weakness added a whole new dimension to my anxiety. Most of the ways I could strengthen her involved medical ninjutsu and telling her my secret techniques, both of which I wasn't very comfortable with. I flopped over onto the bed and rolled myself into a hot dog with my blanket. What to do? What to do? Chapter 33. The day after I had witnessed Minato and Kushina's spar, I started bothering my mother about her affinity and applied a gravity seal to her. After finding out my mom also had a lightning affinity, I spent the next month trying to get my mom to learn ninjutsu. She was resistant to the idea and I didn't understand why until I was a month into teaching her lightning release, Heaven's Palm. She had zero talent in ninjutsu. though she had learned a few techniques to become a qualified jonin, she quickly gave up afterward. She said she thought her time was better spent elsewhere. I wholeheartedly agreed after spending a lot of time trying and failing to teach her Heaven's Palm. I had thought my progress in ninjutsu was slow, but compared to my mother my progress was considered prodigious. I had given up on any fast progress after a while. Instead, I had started trying to get her to do some body modifications. She and I fought over it for another 3 months, all the while her progress with the Heaven's Palm slowly trudged forward. I had spent 6 months total trying to get my mother stronger. If she didn't want to do any body modifications, I couldn't force her, but it was a damper on my mood as of late. I left her to her own devices with the gravity seal. I didn't feel like it was my place to police her exercise. I sighed and cracked my knuckles. Even though I had no success with my mother, I had made some improvements with my lightning constructs and had been pondering experiments and further enhancements. I had been trying to find ways to further improve my Byakugan's range. The Byakugan can detect additional wavelengths of light. While chakra is normally invisible to the normal eye, it emits electromagnetic waves in a different part of the light spectrum. The Byakugan has photoreceptor cells corresponding to those wavelengths, making chakra visible. Different materials absorb different regions of the spectrum and thus will be opaque or transparent to different wavelengths. To see through various objects, Byakugan needs to be able to detect a wavelength that the object is transparent to. There wasn't anything I needed to do about this part of the Byakugan, but it was interesting. The part one could improve was visual acuity or the range of the Byakugan. Visual acuity depends on the amount of cone and rod cells you have. This is why birds like hawks have amazing visual range. They have a huge amount of rod and cone cells. The same applied to the Byakugan. The Byakugan has many more rod or cone cells than the normal eye. To accommodate the increased number of wavelengths the Byakugan detects and to increase the visual acuity for each wavelength. The increase in the number of active rod or cone cells requires increased blood flow to supply it with the necessary nutrition and oxygen, which is why the blood vessels enlarge when the Byakugan is active. I had been thinking about increasing the number of rod/cone cells in my eyes. Though I didn't think it would increase my range much, I was interested in seeing what it did. But after some thought, I gave up on the idea. The Byakugan's range naturally increased and my range had not finished expanding yet, so I shouldn't be in a rush. I wrote down my findings in my book of experiments and decided that I'd get back to it later. Though I knew the clan had people with ranges of more than 10 kilometers, I guess 5 or so would be fine with me. Sigh. I should leave my eyes alone for a while. At least until I could grow new ones. I needed a more private space to get started on Byakugan experiments. I watched Guy exit from the academy. I had seated myself in the usual tree and was watching both new and old faces stream from the academy. Guy was graduating this year in September, which meant Team Minato would soon be complete and the war would soon kick off. I was feeling good about my chances of survival, but was less sure about Guy and Mom. I had tried with my mother and now it was time to offer Guy some training. I caught up to Guy as he was leaving. "Hey Guy!" I tapped him on the shoulder as I spoke. Guy turned and smiled at me. "Hello, my youthful friend." I sent Guy a nod. "What are your plans for today?" Guy sent a wide grin in return. "I was going to have a most youthful training session." "Excellent. Can I join you in some youthful training?" Guy struck his nice guy pose. "Of course, my most youthful friend." Guy took off in the direction of the northern gate. It seems we were running around the village. "So, are you interested in apprenticing under me when you graduate?" Guy's canon team was full of nobodies as far as I knew, so it didn't matter to me if I deprived the team of Guy. If they died because of a lack of Guy, it wasn't my problem. Guy teared up and wiped his tears away with the sleeve of his jumpsuit. "No thank you, my eternal friend. Look deep into my eyes and accept my sincere apology." Guy stopped running and then gave me a deep bow. "I can't look into your eyes if you bow." I gestured for him to stand up. "Are you not interested in an apprenticeship? I may not be as experienced as other jonin, but I could still teach you whatever you needed to know." Guy likely wanted to join a team under his own merit. I think I had made a mistake in asking like this. I want to join a team with my prowess. I don't want people to say I became a ninja because of my connections. I was disappointed, but I tried not to let it show. That's very youthful. I gave Guy a thumbs up and started on my run again. Guy probably thought I was offering an apprenticeship because I felt he wasn't good enough to get a Jonin sensei. It wasn't the case, but trying to deny it would probably look worse than just dropping the topic. I eyed Guy as I ran. He had a lightning affinity, maybe I could teach him. Heaven's palm. How's your chakra control? Guy's shoulders slumped a tiny amount. Not very well, my friend. I still have trouble making even a basic clone. I hummed in reply. So ninjutsu was out. I activated my Byakugan for a moment. Guy didn't have enough chakra to make any shadow clones. I wonder if Guy will be open to body modifications. I looked at Guy. I seem to have ruined his mood. Sigh. Maybe not. I sloppily waved my sword of lightning at a tree and watched as it slid off its stump before falling to the ground. The lightning constructs might make up for my lack of Kaguya bloodline with its versatility. If I wanted to wildly slash at my enemies with a 10-meter lightning sword now I could. Though I had no sword skills and I wasn't willing to invest any time into anything other than basic sword skills. Once I cast the jutsu, the sword wasn't malleable, which was a shame. But I suppose making a sword was already good enough. I shouldn't expect to turn into the Green Lantern, I guess. I gave my sword another swing, this time carving a deep furrow into the ground. What should I call this? I looked at the construct with a critical eye. I was going to slim this down a bit. It didn't look cool when it was this thick. It didn't look anything like a sword. No one would know it was a sword unless I told them. I took a stance and tossed the construct like a javelin into the earth. I watched it tunnel for a while before it dispersed into the ground. Could I use the huge sword to kill big summons? Something to try if I'm ever unfortunate enough to run into a summoner. I'll slim it down a bit and keep calling it a lightning sword. I'd gotten what I wanted out of the lightning construct jutsu, and didn't have any other ideas at the moment. I now had 7 lightning jutsus to my name. It's a shame this had such a huge chakra cost, I thought as I idly twirled the blade around. It looked cool, but it was too expensive to use for normal fighting. I guess that's why people coat weapons in lightning instead of making constructs. I was sitting in my backyard sunbathing while a pair of clones worked on Fuin Jutsu a few meters away from me. The clones were making storage scrolls and explosive tags. I had found out I could sell my seals, and now I had a clone on seal duty almost all day. I want to buy a few houses. Having another stream of income from renters would be nice. I was laying in the grass and thinking whilst my clones were hard at work. The more lightning jutsu I learned, the faster I seemed to learn other lightning jutsu. The things I needed to learn for a new jutsu overlapped with the things I learned when I was practicing other jutsus. It cut down the time I needed to learn stuff considerably. Which was nice, though it still took me a few months to learn anything. I think I inherited some of my mother's lack of talent in ninjutsu. That or all Hyuga had no talent in ninjutsu. I had just thought ninjutsu was hard, but there were lots of people with more than one nature release even when it wasn't their affinity. But then again, most people only learn their affinity. It was only the truly talented that learned more than their affinity. Sigh. My control was amazing, but once distance was involved, my control was lacking. I'd been able to overcome the problem some with training, but I was still lacking. Was this a me problem or a Hyuga problem? Mom was the only other Hyuga I spent time with. I blew a breath from my nose. I'll get around to figuring it out eventually. Perhaps I need to scan a few Hyuga. Shiro! Look at what I found! Kushina was waving a pair of scrolls around while she danced towards me. I just stared dully at her in response. She sent me a sunny smile and slid the scrolls into my pockets. I raised an eyebrow and ignored the scrolls for now. What brings you here? I was practicing with a dual-bladed lightning sword after remembering the dual-bladed lightsaber from Star Wars. I wanted to say bye before I left. I'm going to reinforce some buildings around the border for a few months. That sounded like an opportunity. With Fuinjutsu. Kushina nodded. With Fuinjutsu. Learning Fuinjutsu and the possibility of fighting, how could I resist? Can I come? Kushina bit her lip and looked to be lost in thought. Eventually, she shook her head. No, it's highly classified, no one is supposed to know about it. I raised an eyebrow at her. Why was I told then? At my look, Kushina looked sheepish and rubbed the back of her head. I had forgotten until now. I rolled my eyes at her. All right. My body was impacted and I blinked in surprise as I was caught in a hug. So, have you said goodbye to Mom? Kushina nodded and released me from the hug. Yep, you and Kakashi are the last people I needed to see. I nodded and took the scrolls from my pocket. Lightning Release, Lightning Dragon Jutsu. I skimmed the scroll for a while and was slightly disappointed. I would be more interested in the technique if it didn't require 12 hand seals. As it was anything with more than 6 hand seals was usually useless in combat. I unrolled the second scroll. Lightning Release, Omnidirectional Lightning Wave. Something I already had memorized and also something useless as of now, another big move with too many hand seals. I looked up from the scroll to see Kushina's expectant face. Thanks, Kushina. I hugged her with as much enthusiasm as I could muster. Anytime, Shiro. The hug lasted a few seconds before Kushina broke it. Alright, I gotta go. I have to go see Grumpy Kakashi. And with a flamboyant wave, she disappeared in a shunshin. I sighed and looked at the sun. I had about 8 hours left in my day. Back to training. So? My mother sent me an unamused look. So? I started tapping my fingers on the table. How do you feel about adding another member to our team? Mom wrinkled her nose and knitted her brows, and that told me all I need to know about her answer. I want to take Dewey from the Genin Corps and add him to our team. Mom's features smoothed over and she looked less opposed to the idea. Why's that? It was almost impossible to escape from the Genin Corps once you were there. Your only chance of escape was a random jonin taking interest while you were young. If you were over 15 and in the Genin Corps, you were doomed to the Genin Corps for life. Dewey practices the 8 gates and prolonged use of the 8 gates causes weakness, which is why Dewey is still a genin. That wasn't completely true. Dewey was still a genin in base strength. The 8 gates only multiplied your existing strength. Makes sense. Dewey is known for failing basic missions. I guess that could be attributed to his use of the 8 gates. Mom nodded at me but didn't look sold on the idea. Even with opening all 8 gates, Dewey was still weak, only being able to fight a few elite ninjas with most of them escaping. It was much different from Cannon Guy, who nearly defeated a pseudo-space god. This could be attributed to Guy's higher base strength. So, my goal was to bump Dewey up a few notches in base strength, mainly with body modifications and liberal use of medical ninjutsu. Mom blew a heavy breath from her nose, crossed her arms, and leaned back in her chair. Give me a few days to think about it. I nodded and stood up. That was more than I thought I would get. All right. I needed to go check on my rabbit. Emergency Rations was a fine specimen, always providing me with discoveries. It seems that cells don't just affect chakra, but chakra also affects the cells. Emergency Rations' chakra recovery rate had become that of a normal genin and his bodily functions seemed to have become more efficient. It was quite the find. But also something I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been looking at a younger rabbit just moments ago. What a discovery! Chakra affects the cells. Now I'm interested in artificially expanding my reserves. Though any changes to my body likely wouldn't happen for a while. As tempting as it was to jump the gun and expand my chakra system, I should do some human trials before I do anything. Or at least some observable human trials. I don't think the woman counts. She could have exploded for all I knew. Could I get Dewey to let me do it to him? A question for later, I suppose. Maybe this is why Madara survived for so long. Being hooked up to the statue and being fed its chakra must have somehow changed him. Being hooked up to the statue might also be why his and Hirishima's chakra combined. Or it could still just be that they were spiritual brothers. How would feeding myself Otsutsuki chakra go? Where could I get Otsutsuki chakra? Could I steal the statue from Madara or Nagato? Questions. Questions. Chapter 34. Mom and I were sitting in the dining room drinking tea. Different from usual, Mom looked annoyed with my presence. Can we add Dewey to our team? My mom looked defeated. Yes. After a week of wearing my mother down, Dewey was finally going to become a member of our team. Though you have to do the paperwork. The smirk my mother sent me was annoying. I suppose this was revenge for bothering her? I sighed. I hadn't even asked Dewey to join yet. A quick hand seal and I sent 3 shadow clones off to do my work for me. I saw Mom's smirk disappear and I sent her a smirk. The paperwork didn't inconvenience me in the slightest. Dewey, you're joining our team. Dewey looked confused, maybe because I was giving him no choice in the matter, or maybe because I invaded his home and woke him up at midnight. Dewey sat up and stared at me for a moment. What? I sent him a sunny smile I had copied from Kushina. Welcome to the team, Dewey. Dewey's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. It seems I had caught Dewey flat-footed. I grabbed Dewey's hand and placed a pin in it. Alright, here's your paperwork. Please sign your name here and write your ninja registration number here. I pointed to the appropriate sections and watched with joy as Dewey mechanically wrote his name and registration number. Alright, thanks, Dewey. With one last sunny smile, I shined out a window I had left open when I entered. A new day dawned. I had kidnapped Dewey early in the morning to assess his skills. He had been training with the 8 gates the previous night, so I had to heal him to get him ready for a spar. The results were disappointing, but expected. Dewey had no talent in the ninja arts. I had thought his taijutsu would be great, but even that was barely above Jinin level. His physical fitness was the only thing he had going for him, though I guess he had to have great fitness to use the gates. I tapped my foot and sent Dewey a look filled with disappointment. He flinched and looked down, avoiding my eyes. Dewey had been caught flat-footed with his abrupt entry into our team and we hadn't had time to chat. Alright. I looked at Dewey, who was still looking away from me. You have no talent for the ninja arts. Dewey slumped. But just because you have no talent doesn't mean you aren't a great ninja. Dewey regained some vigor and his eyes met mine. Now demonstrate the 8 gates for me. Dewey sprang to his feet. Normally I wouldn't open any of the gates unless I had something to protect, but I'll show you what I can do, Shiro. Dewey got into a stance and took a deep breath. I activated my Byakugan and slowed my perception. Gate of opening. I saw one of the tenketsu in Dewey's brain flash. For a lack of a better term, I attributed it to an increase in chakra from that tenketsu. Gate of healing. Another tenketsu in Dewey's brain lit up. Gate of life. A tenketsu on the spine lit up and I deactivated my Byakugan. Dewey's skin was red, veins were bulging all over his body and his hair stood up. Though his Super Saiyan hairstyle made him look silly as even his mustache was standing up. Alright, I've seen enough. Dewey laid on the ground releasing heavy breaths. I was healing him and admiring the lack of damage done to his body. Though there was a huge amount of lactic acid buildup, nothing to worry about as it would only cause muscle soreness. We'll have to get your taijutsu up to scratch. Having such impressive physical fitness is useless if your taijutsu is subpar. Dewey nodded but said nothing. I'll be coming over every night to heal you and spar with you. Well, a clone would, but it was pretty much the same thing. And don't worry about missions for the next 2 months. I'll have some clones making enough money to take care of your necessities. Dewey shook his head and opened his mouth to refuse, but I cut him off. Alright, I've got to go. We'll talk about it later. I disappeared in a shunshin, successfully putting off the conversation. I sat in my makeshift lab pondering ways I could make Dewey stronger. Obviously, he was getting his chakra network expanded and he was going to have his nerves enhanced, but that was as far as my ideas went. I was rolling the idea of implanting some cells from the woman into him. He could use the healing factor. It would help him in recovering from using the gates. Though Dewey having a separate chakra type in his body would be extremely noticeable both to censors and to any of the village's dojutsu users. So, if I wanted Dewey to have that bloodline, I needed to find a way for the two chakras to combine. I didn't even have the slightest idea on how to go about that. Could I just completely trade his chakra out for the woman's? Maybe or maybe not. Chakra was complicated. It was affected by the physical body but also affected the physical body. Sigh. Maybe it didn't have to be too complicated. How about a gravity seal and some body modifications? Let's do that to start with. I won't worry about anything more than that for now. Come on. It's safe. I've done it to myself. Dewey was literally backed into a corner and looked ready to escape. No thanks, young Shiro, the gravity seal is enough for me. I pouted at his refusal. This was the second time we were going through this song and dance. Dewey didn't even want the gravity seal at first. You won't even feel a thing. You'll wake up faster and with a bigger reserve of chakra. Dewey paused for a moment, but then jumped into his nice guy pose. I believe I can become stronger through my own effort. One's true youth fades when they turn their backs on their beliefs. I took a moment to admire almost blinding sparkle on Dewey's teeth. Artificially improving your reserves isn't turning your back on your beliefs. Come on, you'll forget it even happened in a few days. I took a moment to contemplate knocking him out and doing it regardless of his opinion. Dewey seemed to have picked up on my thought. He slipped through a window and started running off into the distance. I approached the window and stuck my head out. I know where you live. You can't run for long. Dewey looked over his shoulder and sped off faster. I shut the window and eyed it for a moment. Perhaps I should have that window sealed? Or maybe just removed entirely. It'd give the village's genin something to do. I stood staring at the letter I had received in disbelief. Apparently, I was doing fine without a lab and there was no need to allocate resources for a personal lab. Though there was a friendly offer to join the research and development department. I balled the letter up and tossed it into the trash. If the village wouldn't pay for my lab, I guess I'd have to do so myself. I think I had enough to outright buy a house. Maybe that's what I'd do. Though it'd have to be outside the Hyuga compound. Mom might apricot the idea as well. I heard the elders were pressuring her to marry anyways. Perhaps getting out of the compound would do her some good as well? Guy was glued to the ground and unable to stand. Dewey was enthusiastically doing squats when he yelled encouragements at Guy. Guy, use your youthful vigor. Dewey was training with Guy. Both of them were using gravity seals. For added efficiency, I was healing them every time they got too tired to move. It was a beautiful display of youth. Haha. I've done it! I turned my attention back to Guy, who was standing and had thrust his arms up in victory. Nicely done, my son. Dewey slapped Guy on the back, knocking him over. Dewey ignored Guy and made his nice guy pose. Now it's time for the next step. Guy had worked his way up again and was enthusiastically waiting for instruction. It's time for 100 push-ups. Dewey dropped to the ground and started doing him. Guy also dropped to the ground but was struggling. I can do it! I have the passion of youth. That's a new one. That's the spurt, Guy. That's the power of youth. I turned my attention back to the seals I was making. I would have joined them, but I was a clone and there was nothing to be gained from exercise. That, and I had money to make. I spared a look at my almost forgotten pile of storage seals. I looked back at Guy. It was interesting how he turned out. I figured he might be different without his eternal rival Kakashi to challenge him, but he seemed mostly the same. Perhaps any changes would become more apparent as he aged. Guy was only 12 now. There was plenty of room for him to change and grow. YOSH. Let's increase our seals. I sighed. At a certain point, the simply too heavy to use or too chakra expensive. I wondered what level Guy would eventually reach. I was maxed at level 5. The increase to level 6 broke my already ridiculous bones. Not that it mattered. plan get out of the compound and make my own lab was a go. Mom was reluctant to move as the house we were living in was her parents', and after some discussion, we agreed to keep the house and rent it out while we bought a new house away from the Hyuga. Though maybe she agreed because I said that I'd be moving regardless of what she chose to do. So, the plan was to get a place in a shinobi-occupied neighborhood with a basement. Sadly, this wasn't a quick process. Thankfully Mom took it upon herself to find the perfect house, and it was no longer my problem. Now I needed to look into getting some equipment. I didn't know where to start or if anything I needed could be bought, so maybe I have to steal it. I'm sure Orochimaru probably had a few hidden labs I could pilfer if needed. Shiro, start packing, we have a mission. I looked up from my book. What are we doing? I had a few experiments planned, so hopefully this mission wasn't too much of a time sink. We're going to Noodles for a patrol mission. So, we were just making sure there were no ninjas trying to hide near Konoha. Can Dewey come? Mom rolled her eyes. Your project can come. I rolled my eyes back at her. He wasn't my project. I guess it's time to field test Dewey. Though it's a shame that the mission would delay house hunting a bit. We were on our way to Noodle Country. Dewey was brimming with excitement and was chattering non-stop, filling what had once been a comfortable silence with constant noise. Mom and I were both quiet people, and having Dewey with us was a change to our usual dynamic. It wasn't a huge upset, it was just different. And perhaps that is for the best. Some change is good after all. So, what's our team name? Dewey's question broke me from my thoughts. No idea. I looked at Mom as I really had no idea. It's Team Hyuga. Something I didn't know. I had thought it was just a nickname. Now we need a new name. Dewey stayed silent and Mom just nodded. Any ideas? Mom and Dewey both stayed silent. Finally, Dewey spoke up. Team Youthful Gentlemen? The word youthful didn't come with its usual enthusiasm. No. Mom didn't like the name but hadn't offered any suggestions of her own. I bounced a few ideas around my head before settling on the least awful one. Team Irregular? Mom shrugged and Dewey nodded. Alrighty. I'll update it when we get back. Well, a shadow clone would. We were midway through Noodle Country when Mom spotted a treasure. And by treasure, I mean a Kaguya. He was apparently leading a little group of genin and was showing them how to remove their tracks and use chakra to keep yourself from sinking into the muddy ground. It was rather touching. Alright, I'll meet you guys at the capital. Mom and Dewey nodded through. Dewey looked confused. Alright, see ya. With a little wave, I took off in a shunshin towards the direction Mom had pointed out. I was about 200 meters from the Kurinin. He was setting up camp and teaching his genin how to start a fire. It brought back memories of Minato teaching me and Kakashi the fire-starting jutsu. How sweet! Though now that I was close, I was hesitant to do anything. The Shikatsu Miyaku only appeared in Kimimaro, so I didn't have much to gain from capturing this guy. I figured it was like would release, only appearing rarely once every few generations. In fact, it might something to do with being the reincarnation of some part Otsutsuki ancestor. Maybe Kimimaro was the reincarnation of one of Hamura's sons or something? I started chewing on my nails. I wish I hadn't even had this thought. It only complicated things. How much did Hashirama's would release have to do with being the reincarnation of a quarter space god and having space god chakra? Working under that assumption, maybe Otsutsuki chakra awoke dormant DNA and gave its wielders access to forgotten bloodlines? Could I awaken or improve my bloodlines by awakening dormant DNA? A lot of DNA was just junk and filled with inactive elements that only become active with stimuli such as environmental changes or trauma. Perhaps Otsutsuki chakra was the stimulus in Hashirama and Kimimaro's case. Going by that logic, chakra itself could also be part of that stimulus and allow for changes to happen in the bodies of potential shinobi while they grow up and train their bodies. Bloodlines are simply unique mutations built upon those changes over generations. Stuff like elemental training should also be reflected in one's DNA. I used my arm to hide my eyes even though it didn't do anything with my Byakugan active. The more I followed this train of thought, the more things made sense. The Tenseigan awoke with Otsutsuki chakra, probably the chakra awakening dormant DNA. The Sharingan awoke with trauma, it was trauma activating dormant DNA. Madara awakening the Rinnegan, its Senju chakra and Uchiha chakra combining, making Demi's 6 paths chakra and awakening dormant DNA. It all seemed to fall together. I resisted the urge to groan. Where do I even start with DNA? I wasn't sure Orochimaru had gotten into DNA yet. Wasn't he just injecting Hashirama's cells into children and killing them when he got booted from the leaf? Was he experimenting with DNA or cells? I couldn't remember. So, I didn't even have anyone to steal research from if he was just messing with cells. Fuck! And emergency rations had changed with exposure to chakra as well. More chakra and DNA fuckery. I couldn't even get into DNA when I was still bumbling around with cells. There was no way I was ever going to be able to get into DNA without computers. And I hadn't seen more than a shitty television so far, so there was no chance of the Naruto-verse having computers. Is this enlightenment? No, I think the word I was looking for was epiphany. I had an epiphany and could do almost nothing with what I had thought of. Sigh. I turned my attention back to the team of Kirinin. They were happily roasting some fish over a fire and chatting. Perhaps I would awaken both the Tenseigan and Shikatsumiyaku if I got some Otsutsuki chakra into my system. Though how pure would the chakra need to be? Could it come from Naruto or Sasuke? Could it come from the Otsutsuki on the moon? Could it come from the statue that Madara was currently hooked up to? Could it even come from Kimimaro? Or could I inject myself with Hashirama's cells and use his chakra? Would it even matter if I dosed myself with chakra? Madara was hooked up to the statue for ages before he awakened the Rinnegan. So many questions. I took a peek at the Kirinin. They were settling in and getting ready for sleep. What do I even do with them? I watched as the female Genin threw more sticks into the fire. Did I even need to do anything with them?